Coming up on this week's Salt and Sauce Chat Show.
A treadmill doesn't even go as fast as what he ran to break the marathon record, and I just think these are like unbelievable human beings that, well, I'm lending my Commonwealth Games blanket to. It's like a so random moment in my life. I would have loved to compete at the Olympics. For me, it's the greatest sporting event in the world, but I can't do that. So this is the next best thing for me, and I've done a couple of Olympics now, and it is so amazing. And the Women's World Cup in France last year was just such a historic moment for women's football and for Scottish women's football that it was an absolute pleasure to be part of it. Pitchside reporting, it's a volatile part of a manager's job when they're coming, after the intensity of a game, when their emotions are really high, and that's why you get anything out of them. Sometimes they snap, sometimes they don't, sometimes they give you something, emotional. It's a very turbulent time, and I think if you have that trust and rapport, it always helps.
Welcome along to another episode of the Salt and Sauce Chat Show. I'm David Simmonds, and on this week's show, delighted to have sports broadcaster for BT Sport, Premier Sports, and On the Dance Floor Golf's podcast presenter. We've got Emma Dodds on the show. Emma, thanks for coming in.
No problem. Thank you for having me. Yeah, great to be here.
No, thanks very much. So I'm going to take you right back all the way to 1996 when your career all kicked off. I believe it began on Clyde's Super Scoreboard. Is that right?
It is right. I mean, I can barely remember what happened last week, never mind in 1996. But gosh, it makes me sound so old, doesn't it? But I used to actually have a Saturday job with Super Scoreboard. Went in as a runner. And I was so intent on trying to get into broadcasting when I was a kid that I used to write to everybody. And at the time it was letters to try and get work experience. And I did Wheel of Fortune, I think when I was about 14 or 15, again as a runner. And I wrote to John McCalmont, as it was, at Radio Clyde numerous times until he finally phoned and offered me a Saturday job there. So I used to go and make the tea and coffee, and then did various roles in there. Working up sort of technical operator, where I used to take all the kit to the ground and set it up for the broadcasters, and I absolutely loved it. And I was taking a gap year between the end of school and university, and it coincided with a girl called Joanne actually leaving Clyde to go to work for Sky, so there became more opportunity there. And the head of sport at the time very kindly allowed me to sort of chaperone out to press conferences and watch what was happening there, and then I was only ever allowed to go to press conferences if I asked the first two questions. And so very quickly in the sort of age of sort of 18 to 19, I ended up doing quite a lot with Radio Clyde, and I loved it. But I was always just a sort of freelance temp, so although I'd do the sports stuff, it was always tempered by the other stuff I would do as well. So I used to answer the phone for Jam Busters, the traffic.
Yep.
So on George Bowie's breakfast show, I'd have a little desk in the newsroom, and everybody who was out on the road would, encounter their problems, and they'd phone me. And I mean, half the time, I grew up in the country. I'm not even a Glasgow girl. I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. The all right, hen, there's a car broken down, about Shaggy Avenue. And I'm thinking, what? Oh, Shaggy Avenue, right? So then I'd have to go in and tell George, there's a car broken down. But I absolutely loved it. And I used to have to get up at 5 a.m. to go and do that. And then if I was lucky, I'd get to a press conference during the day, and then I'd go back to my Jam Busters desk at sort of 4:30 when rush hour would start again. I also used to temp for the promo departments to see all these competitions like George Bowie would have. Like, you can win 102.5 donuts. Whoever would win, I'd have to go out in the Clyde Jeep and deliver the donuts to like the office or the garage or whoever had won it. I mean, it definitely wasn't glamorous, but it got me out and about, and I absolutely loved it. It was a really great grounding and a really cool place to work, at 18.
Yeah, so see, going back to those early days, who did you kind of aspire to be? Where did you want to get to at that stage?
Oh, I loved watching Hazel Irvine. I mean, for me, I went to school in Helensburgh. Hazel Irvine was from Cardress, and I sort of grew up watching her. She was traveling the world, reporting on sport. And again, I was really lucky. I managed to get a work experience with her at the BBC. I think that was actually before I worked at Radio Clyde, so I was probably about 16 at the time. And I remember going in, and Chick Young was there, and Rob McLean. And it's really funny now, people that I see all the time when we're out and about working. But yeah, I went and followed Hazel Irvine for a week, and it was great. I loved it. And she's really into her golf, and she interviewed Annika Sorenstam when I was working with her, and so that's what sort of sparked my love of golf, and especially women's golf as well. So yeah, I mean, Hazel Irvine, I think, really was the main female presenter that I would see on television. And so I sort of thought, oh, I quite like what she's doing. And then obviously getting to meet her, and she was brilliant. She gave me loads of time and advice. And yeah, she's absolutely, I don't actually see her very much now because she doesn't work so much out and about in the field. But yeah, she was an absolute dream, and definitely just the person really I aspired to take their job, basically.
So obviously all the hard work you put in at Radio Clyde, all the donuts you had to deliver, the Jambuster calls you had to answer, you moved on to a role at Rangers. Was this for Rangers TV, the deputy editor role?
It wasn't Rangers TV at the time, actually. I don't know if you follow football, you cast your mind back to Rangers and Celtic signed a deal with NTL.
Yes.
They both got the shirt sponsor, and with that there was also a contract to do their sort of media. And so I actually joined and worked for a company called Premium Television, who were based in London, and they did a whole load of football clubs. And so I was brought in to help with the website initially. It was really before sort of club television started. So we do the website, and we took over the Rangers News, which had been done by First Press at the Daily Record. So we did the Rangers News programme and the Rangers website. And then through that, it developed. I mean, again, I was only like 20 when I started there, so I didn't really have a clue what I was doing. So, I hadn't really done that much writing. It'd all been obviously radio and different things. So, and then there I am having to do interviews and write articles and stuff. But it was great fun. It was a really good learning curve. And then near the end of that, sort of, I'd say the last, 2 to 3 years, the online television came on. And so, I mean, we were taken down to London, and I remember we were put in an apartment that was just near Leicester Square, and I was just like, oh my goodness, look at this. I mean, we were down there for a night, basically to learn how to turn a camera on, press record, focus it, and then, various different things. It was very basic filming and editing skills. But between us all, who none of us had any experience in it, we sort of made it work, albeit as an online platform. And then Setanta came in, and sort of Rangers TV happened through them, and we would work alongside them. And that's how it worked at Rangers. But I was living the dream, to be honest, in that era. Rangers it was the end of Dick Advocat that I went in, and my first trip I think with Rangers was PSG, when Rangers actually won, when Pochettino was playing, Anelka, Mikel Arteta was playing on loan from Barcelona for PSG, and Rangers went over there, and I think they drew or they won, I can't remember, but they ended up getting through. And so I was just like, this is incredible. Like, we had private planes to go over to America for sort of post-season breaks. And I was just like, yeah, this is all right. I can cope with this. Watching football and flying on private planes.
Yeah, I mean, you've done a fair bit of travelling in your career, which we will touch on. I believe after the Rangers role, you moved over to France to work for, is it VM, WM?
It's Warner Music. Yeah, right. Warner Music I worked for. And it was
how was that, moving over to a non-English speaking country and having to adapt to that?
Well, I've been at Rangers for 7 years, and I absolutely loved it. And I have to say, during that time, Rangers achieved so much success that the job was, with any job, when things are going well for the company, it's an enjoyable place to work. Then you have the other extreme, where I think a couple of seasons within that time, Celtic won the league by a considerable margin, and you're sort of firefighting, throughout the season to keep a positive spin on things. It's hard when you work for club media to always, err on the right side of caution. So it's certainly been eventful, but I just sort of felt like I'd never worked away. And I was saying I had a gap year when I was at Radio Clyde. I was due to go to the States and play basketball on a sort of scholarship. So I had only ever intended to work for a year and then go over there. And so I got to sort of 26 and thought, I don't really know anything other than Glasgow. I'd been here 7 years. What else can we do here? And so the opportunity came up to move to Paris. And it was with Warner Music Entertainment, WME. And I work for a department called 360 degrees, which is 360 degrees in French. And we basically marketed the artists after they made their music, as it were. And it was really fun. It was really funky how it came about. I knew the sort of director general there of the department. He was looking for a native English speaker, but who could speak some French, to come in and do this role. And so, I sort of thought, got a bit of French behind me. I did it at school, sort of up to higher A-level standard. And, I know what I'm talking about. My goodness. I went over there and I sat in the first meeting. And they used to have this meeting at 12:15, because my boss always went for lunch. 12:30 till 2 is standard lunchtime in France. And he only had 15 minutes for this meeting because he knew he had to do it quickly because he was going for a lunch meeting. And I sat in that meeting and I did not understand a single word of what they were saying. And I thought, oh no, what have I done here? Like, what have I actually done? We're working in French. I have no idea what's going on. And I was sort of like, right, okay, this is this is not going to be a smooth ride. But actually, as you sort of get used to the colloquialisms and you hear it more and you're around them more, and actually a lot of people are quite keen to practice their English on you, so I didn't mind it. But yeah, moving over to Paris was quite terrifying, actually. I mean, I remember getting to my mom was absolutely distraught, dropping me off at the airport, and so I was moving to Mars, but yeah, just started thinking, why not? It's a cool chance. It's not that far away. You can hop on a flight home. It's quite a small city, a bit like Glasgow, and I loved it over there. So,
I mean,
sorry.
Yes, sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, because you returned back to the UK after a short spell in France, like you say. How long was it you were over there?
Yeah, I was over there for about a year and a half, and I actually probably wouldn't have left when I did if I hadn't had the option to come back for a job in sports broadcasting. But I loved it. We were working with people, like the way Warner Music is set up, it's a global brand, obviously, and you have artists in different territories who are assigned to each office. But if one of them comes into your city, you then are responsible for taking care of it. So we had like Madonna and Michael Bublé, for example, on the label when they would come into Paris. And, Madonna did a private event that we were sort of put on to help with, and it was only the creme de la creme of Parisian who's who that was invited to this. You had to take your passport to prove who you were. You couldn't pass the tickets on. There's only like 100 people, and she was 2 hours late. So we had all of these dignitaries and all of these sort of aristocrats in this place, and this poor DJ guy that was on before her, was like playing away. And like she eventually comes on stage and some of them booed her. I was like, oh my God, you're booing Madonna. But that's what the French are like if you turn up 2 hours late. They've got places to be and things to do. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. And I ended up working on a couple of projects with PSG over there as well, because that was one of the reasons they needed an English native. It was actually a contract done with Warner in London that they needed a native English speaker, but on ground in Paris. And so there was a bit of a collab there, and it was cool. It was back in the days where we made DVDs. Right. So, 100 best goals by Pauletta. This is the glamour that it was. But it was fun, yeah. And then I got the opportunity to come back and work for Setanta at SPL TV. So I just came back. I was an AP, again, never really worked in the TV industry before, but really that was where I wanted to work. And, came in and it was, comping games and logging games and doing all of the stuff that you really need to know how to do if you want to get into television production. And yeah, I loved it. It was great. And, we had Rob McLean there as the presenter. We had Ian Crocker, Jim Proudfoot was there as the commentators. And it was great. It was a great bunch of people that worked in there. And, it was definitely, Colin Davidson who brought me back. And then one day he just came up to me. He knew I had aspirations to do trackside reporting. And just like one day he came up to me in the newsroom, and if you've ever met Colin Davidson, he's a man of quite few words. And he said to me, right, Saturday, you're pitchside reporter for the Hamilton game. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, pitchside reporter. So just be ready. And I was like, okay. And I think this was actually like Thursday night. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was quite nervous. I do remember being quite nervous, but I didn't actually have that long to dwell on it. And I actually think it was Hamilton Motherwell, so it's a Lanarkshire derby.
Yep.
And everybody was great, though. Everyone was really kind and, helped me out. And it was great. And it was really fun. It wasn't nearly as terrifying as my first ever interview that I did at Radio Clyde, though, which was John Spencer. I don't know if you remember. He was playing
the football player. Yeah.
Yeah, it was John Spencer. And I mean, he's quite small in size, so he wasn't towering over me or anything. And I had my little Marantz, which is the tape recorder that we used back then. You plugged your mic in.
Yep.
I was absolutely terrified. I mean, you'd think I was going in for a life-threatening operation. I was terrified. And I went there and I was like going over my questions again, what I was going to ask him. And I mean, he'd literally just signed, I think. It wasn't even an in-depth interview, but I was so nervous. And so the pitch side reporting wasn't nearly as nerve-wracking as that, but yeah, it was. That's how it came about. And then obviously Setanta, unfortunately, ended about a year after I joined. It went into administration, so we were all made redundant, and that was that. But I met a great bunch of people that I'm still friends with now. Yeah,
I mean, from there you moved back to Rangers, didn't you? It was in a different role this time as a presenter and a producer. Was this for Rangers TV or was this for?
Yeah, no, that was for Rangers TV. It was basically because, as you mentioned earlier, Setanta had Rangers Television, and of course when it went down, unfortunately the guys who worked on Rangers TV, they also lost their jobs. So Rangers and Celtic lost their TV channel platform, so they brought it in-house. And again, it was very much a freelance basis. Went in and they were starting quite tentatively to try and do things. There's a few of us actually from Setanta went into work, a few of the editors and producers, and got that up and running, and it was really fun. Yeah, it was good. It different, really different, but it was, again, the chance to actually get in front of the camera, which I'd really wanted to do. And, I'll always be thankful for that opportunity. And then I remember sending my CV to Sky when Setanta went down, and obviously you get the reply, thanks very much. I'm sure they've been inundated with, all of us that got made redundant, but we'll keep your CV on file. And I was like, yeah, right, whatever. And then, so I think that Setanta went down maybe in the July-ish, or June or July, I can't actually remember. And in the following May, I got a phone call completely out of the blue from Sky Sports News saying, you remember you sent us your CV, would you still be interested? And I was like, yep. And that's how that move came about.
Yeah, because you moved there, was it 2010, and you remained there for 3 years. What did your day-to-day role involve at Sky Sports News?
Yeah, I loved it. Again, it was a new venture that they were doing. So they started a thing called Sky Sports News Radio, and it was actually based in Leeds. And it was a complete mimic of what is on Sky Sports News, but in a radio format. And it was basically for people on the go who couldn't watch the telly. And we'd sort of break it down into 15-minute segments within the hour that you would always get your sort of headlines at the top of every segment. And then it would branch out into more considered stories. And it was such a learning curve because it was a brand new entity. We all started at the same time. So the majority of us, I think we were a team of 14. The majority of us moved to Leeds to do it. A couple from actually Sky Sports in London came up. Some people who were already there in the Leeds area joined from other media outlets, and then there was others that moved from other locations. Me from Scotland, a couple from down south, various things, and so we were all just put together. And again, I remember going for my interview for that, and the first thing they did was give you a quiz, and it was like 10 questions on general sports. And I mean, if you've ever watched Sky Sports News, it covers every sport imaginable. So it's like NFL, ice hockey, all this stuff, horse racing. I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, nah, don't know the answer to that. I mean, I wrote something down, but I didn't have a clue what I was talking about in half of them. And so I just resigned myself to the fact there was no way I was getting this job because I'd basically not done very well in the quiz. So I was like really relaxed in the interview and like chatting away and laughing and all of this, thinking, well, this is just a nice chat, if anything. Yep. And then when I got offered the job, I was like, no way, I was sure I'd messed up the interview. And they were like, we really liked your chatty approach.
Oh, well, there you go.
And I was thinking, oh, crikey, maybe if I'd actually done well in the quiz, I might not have got it because I'd have been so nervous. But yeah, it was really fun. And like I say, it was a brand new entity. And, again, we're all still friends. We're all still in a WhatsApp group. And then about 2 years into that, because there was still really strong communication between London and Leeds, I got offered the chance to move down to London into the Sky Sports News studios, and that was great, if not very full on. I mean, anyone who's ever worked in rolling news will know that it is absolutely relentless. And the way it works down there is at the time we were doing 10-hour shifts, so you do either early, middle, or late, and I would always do the 2 p.m. till midnight shift. Right. And so your weeks are really structured. You sort of work 2 on, 2 off, 3 on, 3 off. It's a pattern that you go through, and it took a while to get used to that, but it was great. I'd always really wanted to work on that show, and did it, and it was great. It was really fun. Really fun. I mean,
you mentioned that obviously your first interview that you done was with John Spencer at Motherwell. You've worked alongside some good ex-football players. You've obviously interviewed hundreds down your journey. Who's the real standout ones that you've interviewed and you thought, yeah, I really enjoyed that?
Oh, I mean, there's been so many. I did a big sit down with Rory McIlroy at one point. In fact, it was in early 2014, because it was, 2014, early 2016 actually, because it was before the Rio Olympics. Right. And we did an hour on stage just chatting about anything. And he was just a dream. He was brilliant because he was just really open. It was quite a small group. It wasn't for broadcast purposes, really. It was just a chat with them. And I just remember feeling, because I was a little bit nervous beforehand because you never know somebody in that environment, what they're going to be like. But he was great, like really, really great. And so I always look back on that interview and think, yeah, I really enjoyed that one. Again, people that my icon growing up was always Steffi Graf. And I've never ever been lucky enough to interview her, so that's on my list, massively on my list. And Dame Kelly Holmes, actually, again, a total random. You think I work in football and rugby mostly, but one of my standout memories as a sports fan is her winning at the Olympics, and that expression when she crosses the line, and I loved it. And I got to interview her because, again, she was taking part in a marathon I was working on, and she came over, and it was incredible. I loved it. And another completely random one is Brett Lee, the Australian cricketer, now retired. But, right. I mean, I love cricket, and I used to hate him when he played for Australia. Hate's a really strong word, but I used to despise him because he was so good, and he'd always be yakking away, sledging and different things. And But actually, as a player, I loved him when he wasn't playing England. So I say England, because Scotland, they have a cricket team, but they were never really prominent when I was growing up. So I would always watch England. But yeah, Brett Lee. And then again, he came into my studio for an interview, and it was an absolute legend. Like, I loved it. He was such a good sport. And I'd been to Durham to watch him in his last Australian one-day international. He actually got an Achilles injury. So I was there for his last performance. And I'm such a sports bore, honestly. I mean, you're probably getting an impression of that. But yeah, I just, it's totally random ones. I also interviewed Haile Gebrselassie. And it's a really, it's one of those moments where you're like, this is insane. Like, he broke the marathon record, and he was on my show, and it was for the Dubai Marathon. And again, something that you wouldn't even think about in Dubai is when you do the marathon, you have to start at 6 a.m. for the production.
Of course. Yeah.
And it's so cold. Because at 9 o'clock when the sun comes up, it's absolutely roasting. But it's so cold before that. And it must have been beginning of 2015, because I'd come and worked at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow in 2014. And I'd bought a sort of Commonwealth Games tartan picnic blanket. It was furry, and I'd taken it with me, and I have a photograph of Haile Gebrselassie sitting in my Commonwealth Games tartan rug as he was trying to keep warm at the start of the Dubai Marathon. And he, a treadmill doesn't even go as fast as what he ran to break the marathon record. And I just think these are unbelievable human beings that, well, I'm lending my Commonwealth Games blanket to. It's a so random moment in my life.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on Dubai there. You went over and worked in Dubai for a bit, didn't you? You were head of sport for the Arabian Radio Network, is that correct? Am I right to say you were the first female to do that as well? Yeah,
it was a really, again, amazing experience. It was so much more rewarding than just being a job. I got the opportunity, I got approached actually about going out to do it, because I used to spend quite a lot of time in the Middle East on and off, and I'd sort of been in discussions with them about doing some freelance work at various events, and then they had a vacancy that came up that was the head of sport. And so at the time, this chief executive was an Australian guy, and directly below him at the English speaking radio network was an English lady called Sue Parry. And sort of Sue had been in touch with me in the past, and yeah, she just got in touch totally randomly. I'd actually been in the Middle East, and I was sitting on the tarmac in Dubai to fly home, and I got this email, and it was just a random one of, would you be interested in a permanent job out here? And I was sort of like, And at the time, I really hadn't considered moving anywhere other than Scotland. It wasn't really on my radar at all. But just a few things away from work it fitted in with, and yeah, it was an unbelievable experience. Once again, I mean, packing up your life to move to the Middle East, where it's a completely different culture, and I had to go through 3 rounds of interviews for that. I say interviews, it wasn't really an interview as such, it's more a meeting with the Emiratis who, obviously work within the organisation, because part of it's government run. So, I'd have to go to the sort of head of radio, and then it's part of a much bigger group, a business group. So I would then have to go to the head of the business group. And I remember going into that meeting, which was my final one before obviously being offered the job, and he just quizzed me on Barcelona, the football team, because he was obsessed with Barcelona, and he had a Barcelona hat on, and I was just asking me what my sort of knowledge of the Spanish league was, and I was like, wow. So yeah, but it was incredible. It's a 9-station radio network across 6 languages, and we were the main media partner really for anything that happened within the region. And I mean, anything from literary festivals to anything within sport to business conventions. It's the leading business channel out there as well. And it was such a rewarding role that I learned so much from a growth development as far as work's concerned, managing people, managing events in different territories, and also, with regards to the way other people live, totally different cultures, because again, we had Indian channels, we had Filipino tag-along channels, English-speaking channels, Arabic channels, and you're working within such a diverse group of traditions and different, nationalities. It was incredible, and yeah, it was just a real eye-opener actually of how you can live multiculturally, and a lot of my colleagues had brought their kids up there, and how racism and anti-racism is such a big part of society at the moment, and again, you come from Scotland, bigotry and religion is such a big part of society, and you go over there and nobody sees anything differently than a person, and I'm talking in the company I was working with, and it was incredible. We celebrated all the different, religious beliefs and festivals, Diwali and Christmas and Ramadan and Eid and all of the different things. It was really incredible. I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
How long did you spend out there in total?
Just over 2 years out there. I always said to myself, because again, Dubai is a black hole. I don't mean this to sound bad, but if you don't get out after a short period of time, you are literally there forever. I've got mates who went for a year and they're still there 10 years later. So that's not a bad thing. It's just I always knew I wanted to go for a couple of years and do the job and sort of take it to a point where I thought would grow. And, it did. The profit levels of the company were up. We had an amazing team of full-time and freelance staff working on the sporting events. I think the broadcasting figures were up massively. So I felt like I'd sort of done my job of transitioning that role from being nothing into a sports presenter's role. I mean, I met one of my best mates who is now one of my best mates, a guy called Chris McCarty, who's out there. He was freelance and he came on board to work with me, and he is now the head of sport. He took over when I left. So that was really cool to see that happen. And yeah, I mean, it was incredible. And again, through that, you travel. We did a lot with Emirates, the airline, as a sponsor. I did the Asian Cup out in Australia, the Melbourne Cup, the horse racing out in Australia. And yeah, just getting to see the world through a different perspective was incredible. Yeah, it's two of the best years I've ever spent.
You touched on earlier, obviously, how you worked at the Commonwealth Games in 2014. You've done quite a diverse range of events, if you like. Obviously, the latest Women's World Cup. You've worked at the Olympics as well. How does these big events compare to like what you mentioned on the Lanarkshire Derby, Hamilton against Motherwell? How do the big events, working at them, compare to your smaller, mundane, day-to-day ones that you normally do?
You say mundane, but it's sort of normal life.
Yeah, it becomes the norm, doesn't it?
It's the bread and butter, isn't it? Sort of Premiership, the Championship, the Scottish, Scottish Cup, Betfred Cup, and then we've got Pro 14, the Premier League down south. It's what you do every day of the week, and then you go to these tournaments, and yeah, it's all encompassing because it is so full on. You don't breathe really for the 4 weeks or 5 weeks that you're there, because it doesn't stop. You're there for a short period of time to try and do as much as you possibly can, and it's exhausting. If I'm being perfectly honest, it's exhausting because you're going to Rio, a completely different city, a completely different culture, and trying to do the best you can, and working with different people as well, because again, the Olympics bring together cultures from all over the world, and you're in my case, I was working for the Olympic Broadcasting Service, so you're representing the host broadcaster and then trying to tell a story through completely neutral eyes of where you are when you're not from there. And so you're trying to work with local assistants, and you don't speak the language. I mean, it's so challenging, but it's so rewarding because you then see the finished product of the programming that you put out, and and add into that the bit that everyone else sees, which is the sporting achievements and the actual true heroes are the people who are taking part. And yeah, you become so immersed in it that when you come home, it's almost like it was a dream. You sort of are looking from the outside in, the outside in on what it was, as opposed to being in it, and then looking out. I'd say it's so rewarding. It's slightly surreal. I mean, I would have loved to competed at the Olympics. For me, it's the greatest sporting event in the world, but I can't do that. So this is the next best thing for me, and I've done a couple of Olympics now, and it's amazing. And the Women's World Cup in France last year was just such a historic moment for women's football and for Scottish women's football that it was an absolute pleasure to be part of it.
Yeah, I mean, we've touched on, obviously, in this interview how you worked at Setanta, Radio Clyde, Sky Sports News. You're now with BT Sport and Premier Sport, which you've been with BT since 2016. How does working with them compare to the others?
Oh, it's amazing. BT Sport, I was with BT initially in 2013 as well, before heading out to Dubai. And again, the team of people that they put together is so unique. It's a very small operation that they have in Scotland, and it's remained pretty much consistent personnel-wise since the start. And so, I would definitely say it's very much like a family. It's a bit different now, obviously, with COVID, because we can't see each other face to face. A lot of things are done remotely, and broadcasting is done remotely now. It's done differently, than it would have been before COVID. But in the past, we socialised together. We'd go for lunch together. We would travel together for games, for the longer haul games. Stay over in the hotels. We spent probably more time together than we did with our own families, particularly when BT had the Scottish League football. Again, like I say, it's a bit different now, but yeah, it's the people that make it. And being part of a small team, you pretty much have to get on, and you have to have each other's back, and that was definitely the case. And credit to the people higher up in Sunset and Vine and BT Sport, because personally, I'm biased because I was part of it, but I think the attitude they approached when doing the broadcasting is very different to other outlets. It's not quite as serious. It covers all the serious points. It covers what you need to know, but there's also an element of humor in there, and you're allowed to be yourself. You're not, just somebody with a microphone. You're allowed to bring your personality into the broadcasting, which I think, I'm quite an expressional person. Anyone who knows me will vouch for that. But I think part of doing your job well is being able to bring out your personality on screen as well, and you're not just there to tick a box. So personally, I love BT Sport and Premier Sport. That is key to both of their briefs of how they want their shows to be, and we have a laugh. People don't want just to watch robots. They want to watch people who when they get wet or get rained on, that they can have a laugh at themselves for looking soaking wet on the telly, or what I mean. It's funny. You take the mickey out of each other. It's yeah, we've got a good rapport on and off the screen, and what you see on the screen is pretty much what you see off it as well. It's great fun.
Yeah, no. Tell us about some of your colleagues. Obviously, you've got big characters like Ali McCoy, Chris Sutton, etc. How is it working so closely with they guys?
Oh, they're great. The first question you always get asked when you work with these guys is what they really like, and I hate to disappoint people, but they really are nice guys. They really are, great professionals. They wouldn't do what they do if they weren't. They all have a very different style. Some fans love them, some fans hate them. It's just the way it is. You're never going to please anyone, especially not in Scotland, for goodness sake. I mean, you can't please, half the time you can't even please the people you want to up here when it comes to football. But yeah, they're great. And like I say, when you spend time with, when you're sitting having breakfast, in a hotel with somebody, or you're on a bus for a couple of hours, heading up, you get to know them beyond the microphone. You get to know them beyond football. But yeah, they're massively passionate about what they do, and they wouldn't be doing it if they weren't as good as they are. And I mean, personally, it's an absolute pleasure. As a sort of anchor, they make my job much easier because they're knowledgeable and fun and relaxed. And yeah, I just think, everybody is entitled to an opinion in life. We're in a position where we are paid to, not me personally, because it's not particularly my job to have an opinion on shows, but they are paid to have an opinion, and, love it or loathe it. You have to respect the fact they're willing to put their head, above the parapet and have their opinion. And if you don't like it, then that's also okay.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like you said, COVID's changed things quite a bit, but you guys are in quite a privileged position where you can be in the stadium when games are going on. What is it like? It must be quite an eerie feeling if there's a game going on the pitch, whether it be football, rugby, whatever it is, and someone scores or gets a try and there's no loud cheers, because obviously watching in the telly, some channels have dubbed like crowd noises and stuff like that, so it gives you a slight atmosphere, but to be in the actual stadium, how is that?
Initially, it was very surreal, for sure. Again, I've done a few pre-seasons where I've been away and the stadiums have been quite empty. So, you think, okay, fair enough. But the games don't really mean anything. But, to come back and actually have, these mean as much as they did last season, and the stadiums were full of fans screaming and shouting. I mean, the one thing you can do is hear what they're saying. So it actually gives you a really good insight into maybe tactics, what the manager's shouting from the sidelines, what the, defenders are shouting, or, how they're communicating between each other. And yeah, I mean, it gives you an insight as well into who the talkers are in the team, which is quite interesting from our point of view when you're trying to analyse how a game is played. I mean, the one thing in the rugby I will say is, my goodness, when they hit each other, oh man, it actually sends a chill down your spine. It's just like, they
just hearing the thumps.
Full pelt, and you just hear them hitting each other. It's like, wow, like what is going on in their body when that reverberates through it? So yeah, it's a shame. You said it. We're massively privileged. We can get in and watch these games, and it's not lost on us at all. I appreciate every day the fact that I'm still able to work. Whether it's in a reduced capacity or not, that I'm still able to get out there and do my job when so many people aren't at the moment. It's so different, though. I mean, what I'd say from my job, especially when I'm pitch side reporting, is I would always be very close to the manager. Shake their hand before and after the game. Have a bit of, chat before the interview's recorded. You can have a bit of a rapport there. It's so different now. They're brought to you. They stand 2 meters away. Sometimes they're wearing a mask. Sometimes they're not. It's very difficult now to have a sort of personal relationship with them where, and also that is a huge part of my job, because you need the trust as well when you're dealing with people time and time again. And, pitch side reporting, it's a volatile part of a manager's job when they're coming, after the intensity of a game, when their emotions are really high. And, that's why you get anything out of them. Sometimes they snap, sometimes they don't, sometimes they give you something, emotional. It's it's a very turbulent time, and I think if you have that trust and rapport, it always helps. But now, just for safety, it's the way it is. It is what it is, and again, it is what it is, so we can have live sport. But I do miss it. I miss the fans, because I feel when I'm standing pitch side and it's a full stadium, I perform. I don't know if it's better, but I feel my adrenaline is more, and you soak
really up the atmosphere, don't you, and get involved in that.
Yeah. I mean, I remember doing a game at the Nou Camp. It wouldn't have been last year; it must be the year before now, and a Champions League game, and I was doing a pitch side hit with Robbie Savage for BT, and we were just standing there, and then all of a sudden Barcelona came out to warm up, and the whole entire place went up, and it makes the hairs in the back of your neck stand up. We're just doing our little thing here, and then the whole place, the main event comes onto the pitch, and I mean, that is something that money can't buy in our jobs, and we're hugely lucky to be able to do it. But again, the international travel's gone as well at the moment for obvious reasons, and so the dynamics of the jobs have changed, but we're still able to do things like this on Zoom and do socially distanced interviews, which is great.
Absolutely. So you touched on the Nou Camp there. Obviously, like we've said before, you've done Olympics, you've done rugby, you've done everything near enough. What's the best venue you think you've been part of?
Oh, now you're asking me. I mean, the Nou Camp and the Bernabeu are two for sure that are they're just quite surreal because they're so big. I don't know how the fans at the top, take it in, to be quite honest. But again, I mean, going to the Olympics was amazing, and being in the athletics stadium when the main events of the athletics were on, I wasn't lucky enough to go to London 2012 actually, but I really wish I had been. But sort of being there in Rio was amazing. Usain Bolt was racing, and you're seeing stuff that inspires kids to take up running right in front of your eyes. I mean, that's incredible. I'm a massive winter sport fan as well, and going to Pyeongchang for the Winter Olympics in 18 maybe. It was Lindsay Vonn, again, somebody whose career I followed, really closely. It was her final Olympics, and just going out and seeing the ski set up, and it's not something that in my role I get to do very often. But I would have given my right arm to be a professional skier. Obviously, that didn't happen. But to see her come down, she didn't win gold, but just to see the course set up and, being in and around the guy who designed it and different things. I mean, for me, that personally was probably one of the most awe-inspiring sort of sights I've seen. But that's just a really personal sort of interpretation of how I love sport. But yeah, I mean, the football stadiums, they're just so big. The Emirates, Ibrox, Celtic Park, Hampden, for me personally, it's a bit far away from the pitch, but I know we've all got an opinion on it. But it's the actual match, I think, makes it special as well. When you're in there, if you watch a good game or if the atmosphere is particularly good, there's various different things that happen. And I mean, for me as well, like Murrayfield when Scotland are playing in rugby is just electric. When they win, it's amazing. Like, I love it. I can't get enough of it.
You're a busy lady. You're a very busy lady. You do your own podcast, a golf podcast called On the Dance Floor Golfs.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell us about that.
Well, I started working. Well, I did a few things. I did a lot of golf when I worked out in the Middle East for obvious reasons. There's quite a lot of professional tournaments that start out there. I've got a few friends that play golf, or I had a few friends at the time. And I got quite friendly with a girl called Beth Allen, who is a professional golfer from California but lives in Edinburgh. And just through various sort of chats and just the way I would look at how female golf was reported, I didn't really feel that it got very much credit for anything. If I'm being perfectly honest, I didn't get any coverage. And it's definitely improved in the past sort of 18 months to 2 years for sure. But I just sort of had this idea with the fact that Solheim was coming to Scotland and Glen Eagles that, what about doing a podcast that maybe just shines the light on women's golf a little bit in the build up to that, and we could try and get Scottish golf involved and visit Scotland. And it really just went from a conversation at a golf awards event to happening. As I sort of said to Beth, would you be up for doing a podcast? And she's like, yeah, because she's quite a vibrant character. And she was like, yeah, for sure. And so I spoke to Aberdeen Standard Investments, who sponsor a lot of golf events, and they were really interested in it. And so from there, it sort of grew arms and legs, and Visit Scotland backed it. And so we made it sort of geared towards Solheim. But then after the Solheim, I thought, well, I don't really want to stop doing it. And it's been a bit tricky because the women's golf tour has been, stop-start. But, they did brilliantly. I think they got 12 events on after the first lockdown last year to get it going. And there's some amazing news coming out of it just now with a new 4 series event starting around the world. So yeah, there's loads of positives, and so I love doing it. Yeah, I'm also engaged to a golfer, so that's another good reason to to do it. So shining the light on women's golf, and it's just I love doing it. We don't get to do the episodes as often as we would like because again, just for various reasons of timings and different things like that. So we try and do one a month, which, I think is good. But yeah, it's really fun. And we try and do them because, again, I try and get out to a few of the golf events on tour and try and do them in different locations. So we did one on a rooftop bar in Abu Dhabi at the start of last year, which seems like such a distant memory because it was just before lockdown.
Well, I need to speak to my manager and see about doing one of these.
Put them on to me. I'll sort you out.
Nice one. You've been doing a lot of cycling indoors, Emma, recently for a very worthwhile cause. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I got approached to take part and be involved with the Doddy Aid and Doddy Gump in December, and it was starting on the 1st of January, and it's basically a challenge to track your miles. So whatever you do in a day, we were looking for you just to report them on the app, and sort of we're broken into the traditional old rugby areas, so sort of north, Glasgow, Edinburgh, south, sort of exiles. So we've all got our different teams and we've all been allocated different captains. So in my team, Ali McCoist is the team manager. Kelly Brown, who obviously is a former Scotland player and is on the coaching staff at Glasgow Warriors, is our captain. I am the ladies' captain. We've got Al Kellock, another ex-rugby player, who is our vice-captain. And we have Kenny Logan, who is our chairman. So we've got a strong infrastructure there. And there are so many great people involved. We've got Doogie Vipond involved, and, there's Rory Lawson, and Ailey Barber is the Edinburgh ladies' captain. And so, it's been amazing. And I have to say, hats off to Rob Wainwright, whose initial idea it was, because when he asked me to be involved in this, and we were going to try and raise some money, obviously for Doddy Weir's charity and motor neuron disease and the research into, because it's an absolute scandal that there is no course of treatment for it. I thought, okay, this is amazing. I love Doddy. I've worked with him loads of times, and he's just that character that really, really rubs off on you. And anything that you can do to help, I'd be more than willing. And so it's such a collective effort that I thought this is going to be great fun. And my goodness, it's surpassed all my expectations. It's been amazing. Like, great camaraderie. We've been doing Zooms every week. And the people who have signed up have been phenomenal. Like, people maybe who, needed a little bit of motivation to get moving in January. And, they've been clocking in miles, surpassed their own targets. And it's anything from walking the dog to climbing a hill to going skiing. Actually, and one of my mates, a ski instructor in Austria, I've got her involved to clock her miles. We're still not winning on the miles front, but we're doing pretty well in the money. And it was last weekend actually, Mark Beaumont, again another amazing name from the world of cycling, came up with an idea of doing 240 miles in a day. And I was like, wow, okay. But we were allowed, thankfully, to break into sub teams. And so myself, Rory Hamilton, the commentator, his girlfriend Sarah, and Robert, a guy we went to school with, we formed our own little team. And Robert, a bit of a secret weapon because he's done triathlons before. And I did, myself and my fiance, we did 30 miles each to form our 60 out of the 240. I think Rory actually ended up doing about 80. Sarah did 60, I think. Rob started at 6 a.m. and stayed on the bike till about 5 p.m. and did 250 miles. I mean, that's nuts.
Wow.
Anyway, the aim of the game was to raise money, and unbelievably, Doddy Aid has now raised over £1 million in January and the beginning of February. Yeah, it's unbelievable. I think in my head, I thought, crikey, if we can get to 100,000, that'd be amazing. But everybody who has shared it on social media, everyone who's taken part, everyone who's donated, it's been such a collective effort. And, every one of us who has been sort of leading the charge and trying to cajole people into taking part are so grateful. And, the bigger picture is here that money is going to be spent on such a worthwhile cause. And yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
I think there was news in the press that there might actually be some developments in motor neuron disease and the obviously the cure for it potentially. So hopefully, like you say, that money that you've raised can go on and hopefully find a cure for it.
For sure.
Like I say, you're a busy lady. You're also a CEO, co-owner of Expos Pro. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So that started. To be fair, I've had to take a bit of a step back from that actually, but I started it with my friend Karen a couple of years ago, and she pretty much runs it now. Just time on my side was getting away from me, and that's sort of her area of expertise. But I had joined in with her for a couple of years to start Expos Pro, which is sort of like there was a slant of sports marketing, but it's basically a social marketing company, and she's brilliant. She does great work with a lot of major brands, and it was phenomenal. Again, just meeting people and doing different things and going down sort of business avenues that I'd never been involved in before. But yeah, it's fantastic venture, and Karen's doing brilliantly with that now.
Yeah, I mean, you're a busy lady. I've done my research on you. I've been having a wee look. You teach English abroad as well whenever you're abroad. Is that correct? You're TEFL qualified?
Yeah, TEFL. I don't actually do that anymore, but that was more actually was something that I got before I moved to Paris, because I thought, well, if this job doesn't work, at least I've got something to fall back on. Yep. It's just basically qualified to teach English to non-native speakers. And so I actually used to do some work at a business school out there, who would teach English to business people. Because in France, one of the things that happens is you get like a formation, it's called. And so when you work for a company as staff, a member of staff, you're entitled by the government to a certain amount of hours of training every week if you want. I mean, it can be anything from, cookery to cross-stitching to languages. And a lot of companies would send their executives to learn English. And so we would do that. And I would sort of do it, in the evenings or whatever. And it's just another random thing that I do. I haven't done it for probably, I moved back from Paris now, 2008. So 2009 maybe, but I haven't done it since then, I have to be honest. I don't go on holiday and sit and teach English.
But before COVID obviously hit, I think you did quite a lot of like live events, like after dinner, sort of black tie do's. Do you think we'll ever return to that anytime soon? And if we do, will you be happy to do more of that sort of work? Oh,
I miss it so much. I miss it so much. It's such great fun. The energy of being in a room with people and just that. Yourself, if you've ever been to any form of event that you've maybe paid for a ticket to go to, it's like just the fun. I can't even remember what it was like. Going out for dinner, never mind going to a function, but yeah, it was amazing. And a lot of them, were to raise money for really good causes as well. I've done a lot of work with David Duke at Street Soccer, and after the first lockdown, or during the first lockdown, we actually did a black tie dinner on Zoom, and it was incredible. And I think he raised over £70,000 for Street Soccer by doing that. And I'm sitting here in my kitchen in a little black dress with my hair done, and it was amazing. The job that they did for that was absolutely incredible. And so that's a new way of doing it. But I'd done a few things with him in the past where he'd had like Gok Kwan involved. And just that interaction with people. I do think they'll come back. I really do. I'm trying to be optimistic about the future, and, the vaccine's here. And, once we get all the people that need to be vaccinated, I'm really hopeful that we can start breaking out. If it's only from looking at other countries, the likes of Australia and some of the Scandinavian countries who've really managed to get fans back in the stadiums for a start, watching the rugby down under, and there's 30,000 people in the stands. The Australian Open is supposed to have fans if it actually goes ahead, given the current, curveballs that they've had in the past couple of days. But yeah, I'm really optimistic, and I think we'll all appreciate it a bit more. And, I just hope that, as long as people can stay safe, because, there's been a lot of heartache caused by all of this, but if people can stay safe, then I'm really hopeful that we can get back out and interact and have a laugh and raise money and just do what we do, because it's what keeps us all going. If I don't think it's going to come back, I don't know what I'd be focusing on at the moment.
Exactly. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show this week, ladies and gentlemen. Emma Dodds.
Thank you.